Alrighty, so I just wanted to point out something that you may have came across over yesterday when you were working through your sheet, and I don't want to take too much time going over this, so I'm gonna try to make this quick. All right. So when you were working on number 3, you see that the question asked you select all of the triangles that are reflections of triangle CHY. Okay. So what this question was insinuating was for you to select all the triangles that would be a reflection of CHY if you reflected it one time. Okay, one time. And if you did that, you would have denoted that what the triangles that I have marked here are the only possible reflections if you only reflected triangle CHY one time. All right. Well, I'm here to tell you that actually all of the triangles are possible reflections of triangle CHY. All right, and that is going to introduce to you, okay, the term sequence of transformations, right? Sequences of transformations, right? And in this case, sequences of reflections, all right? And in everyday language, when you think of the word sequence, okay, you can think of, okay, something happening and then another thing happening after that and then another thing, all right? And the same thing applies to sequences of transformations, right? You can reflect a shape, then you can translate it, and then you can rotate it, okay, and vice versa. There's so many ways you could transform a shape. That's why we just call it sequences of transformations, all right? But in our specific scenario, it's a sequences of reflections, all right? So let me break that down to you, okay? Let's look at RVN, triangle RVN, okay? CHY, okay, can map onto RVN, okay? And I'm going to show you a couple ways to go about it, right? And try to stay with me here, and I'm going to slow down just a little bit. That way you can just understand what's happening visually, all right? So I could take CHY, I could reflect it over the x-axis, and it would put me onto this triangle here. And then I could simply just reflect over the line y equals negative x, okay, and then it would put me onto that triangle, okay? But you notice that I didn't just reflect one time. It looks like I reflected 2 times, all right? And that's what I would denote as a sequence of transformations, and in this case, a sequence of reflections, all right? But there's another, there are 2 other ways I could go about getting here, all right? And they're going to seem pretty unnecessary and long, but I need to show this to you so you understand how we could also get here. So if I reflected the triangle over the y-axis, it put me onto FDW. And then if I reflected over the x-axis, it would put me onto x prime L prime P prime. All right. And then if I reflected it over this line, y equals x, it would put me onto this triangle. And then I would just have to reflect this triangle one more time over the y-axis, and it'd put me right onto the triangle RVN, okay? And I know that seemed long, and it was long, and it's pretty unnecessary, all right? But that could get me there, all right? And there's one more, okay? And I'm not going to say it all over again because I'm just going to pretend that we got here again, okay? Remember, how did we get to this triangle? Remember, we reflected over the y, then we reflected over the x, okay? So once we get here, there's another way I can go about it. Instead of reflecting over the line y equals x, I could just reflect over the y-axis immediately from here, and it'd put me onto this triangle. And then I could just reflect over the line y equals negative x, and it'd put me onto that triangle as well. All right. So you see that there are so many ways you go about it, and it's actually very unnecessary. I could actually even go as far as saying, well, I can reflect this triangle over the x-axis, and it put me here. And then I could reflect it over the y-axis and put me here, okay? And then I could flip it over this line, y equals x, and it put me here, and then reflect over the y, and it put me back here. There's so many ways to go about it, but that's just the general gist of how you could, the possible sequences of reflections you could take to get from CHY all the way onto RVN, okay? So now all of a sudden this is a possible reflection. All right, and you don't have to write this. I'm just showing you this. All right, and you can assume the same thing is going to happen to P prime L prime X prime. Can CHY reflect onto that? Yes. Okay, and I can show you here. Okay, how can I get from here to here? Well, I could reflect over the y-axis and it put me here onto this triangle, and then I could reflect over the x-axis and boom, now I'm here. Okay, now I have reflected onto that. Okay, that was a sequence of reflections, or I could reflect over the x-axis and it would put me here. All right, and then I can reflect over the y-axis and it put me over there again, okay? But again, there's so many unnecessary ways you can go about this as well. You could go here, reflect over the x, okay? Reflect over the line y equals negative x, and it put you here, and then reflect over the y, and that'll put you here, and then reflect over the line y equals x, and it put you back up here. Okay, so there's just so many ways. There's so many ways you can go about it, but that's just, I just want you to get an idea of what's happening here, right? There's so many possible ways you can go about it. All right, and last, let's just do this last one. Okay, could CHY end up on F prime, W prime, D prime? Yes, you could flip this triangle over the y-axis and put you here, and then you could flip over the line y equals negative x, and it puts you up here. All right. Okay, or you can go the long way, okay? Or you could reflect over the x-axis here, okay? You could reflect over the y-axis, put you here. Reflect over the x-axis again, and put you up here, and then reflect over the line y equals x and put you there. And again, there are so many other ways you can go about it, right? So many flip-flop ways. But like I said, at the end of the day, you can still perform a sequence of reflections, and it gets triangle CHY onto all of these triangles here.